A 20-year-old cold case was solved in 2019, and as the truth unfolded, the details just got more and more horrifying. It's time to talk true crime, and this is the case of the Racine County Jane Doe, now known as Peggy Lynn Johnson-Schroeder. It's July 21st of 1999, and a man is walking along his daily route in Raymond, Wisconsin, which is about 75 miles north of Chicago. And this is when he would see the lifeless body of a young woman in a cornfield right off of the road, so he would call it into authorities. She'd been wearing a men's Western-style button-up, black sweatpants, no shoes or socks, and appeared to have gone through some very extreme circumstances. She appeared malnourished, had very visible severe injuries, and it had rained the night before, of course, so any hopes of substantial evidence was already pretty much out the window. The woman appeared to be between the ages of 18 and 35 with reddish-brown curly hair, around 5'8" and 120 pounds, but that's really all they had to go on because she didn't have ID on or around her. This being an accident was pretty quickly ruled out as an option, so they do an autopsy, and the discoveries are absolutely horrifying. I do not know how a human could do this to another human. She had chemical burns on about 25% of her body, and the burns had occurred at different times. They were at different healing stages. She had bruising along her upper torso and her face, including 4 lacerations from blunt force trauma to the back of the head and cauliflower ear. As if that was already not horrific enough, she had broken ribs post-mortem and drag marks from her midsection down. And there were more injuries reported than the ones I just mentioned, and just to think about what this young woman was going through is incomprehensible and just heart-shattering that someone couldn't get away from this kind of situation. The cause of death was ruled as sepsis pneumonia as a result of infection from injuries sustained from chronic abuse. There weren't really any missing persons reports with this woman's description, and they had no idea who she could possibly be since she didn't have ID. There really wasn't evidence. DNA testing wasn't what it is today, so they were kind of left clueless. On October 16th of 2013, Jane Doe at that point's body was exhumed because there had been technological advances in DNA testing and isotopic studies, and they were hoping that this could lead to some sort of answer, but all they really came up with it was that she may have spent some time in Alaska, Montana, or southern Canada. There were really no new advancements in this case up until September 23rd of 2019, so almost 20 years later, when a citizen from Cape Coral, Florida called in saying that he overheard his neighbor saying that she had unalived someone when she lived in Illinois, Linda LaRoche. Advancements in DNA technology from when her body was exhumed would eventually lead to Jane Doe being discovered as then 23-year-old Peggy Lynn Johnson-Schroeder. There really wasn't a connection between the DNA and Linda LaRoche until one of Linda LaRoche's kids were questioned, and they said that they did take in Peggy Lynn as a live-in nanny and housekeeper in exchange for her to live there. About 5 years before her body would be discovered, Peggy Lynn was out looking for some help. When she was around 18 to 19 years old, both her mother and her brother passed away due to different circumstances. Her father wasn't in the picture, and she just didn't really have anyone to rely on. She was just scraping by in life. So she would go to a medical center in McHenry, Illinois, and this is where she would meet Linda LaRoche. Linda LaRoche was a registered nurse, someone that should help people when they need it, give them care, right? So at this point, it seemed like that's exactly what she was doing. She recognized that Peggy had a cognitive impairment and offered to take her into her own home and help her out, give her a place to stay if in turn she would help keep up with the house and nanny her children. Rather than being the support system, the home, the loving family that Peggy deserved, Linda took complete advantage of Peggy's situation. Linda did allude to abusing Peggy, but she had excuses that Peggy was stealing from her or had men over constantly, that Peggy was in the wrong somehow in some way. At one point, Linda said she came home to Peggy standing near the sink with a bottle of pills in her hand, and when Linda asked Peggy what she was doing, she fainted and dropped the bottle of pills down the sink, so Linda took her outside to get some fresh air and didn't know what to do. Mind you, Linda is a registered nurse. She went to schooling for this. She had experience in exactly what to do in these situations, and she did nothing. Nothing. Linda then claimed eventually Peggy woke up, and this is when Linda decided she didn't want Peggy around anymore, so she drove her to a random phone booth where she told her to call her grandma, and apparently that's what she did, and then Linda would drive Peggy to a restaurant to meet up with her grandma, and that's where she left Peggy, and then never saw her again. I guess they somehow got in contact with Peggy's grandma, who said that this absolutely never happened. Shocking. So Linda changes her story to say she did leave her at the restaurant with someone, but she wasn't really sure who. Could have been anyone. Linda, again, reminder for the sixth time, the registered nurse says that Peggy overdosed and she just took her to the side of the road in Wisconsin and left her there. She couldn't deal with her anymore. But now she's claiming that she did not abuse Peggy in any sort of way and that something must have happened to her after she dropped her off on the side of the road in Wisconsin. Also, nowhere on the autopsy does it mention that Peggy had any sort of illicit substance in her body, in her system whatsoever. So this was all complete BS. The criminal complaint, or one of LaRoche's kids, said that Peggy was forced to sleep in the crawl space and yelled at like an animal. At one point, Linda apparently hit Peggy in the head with a pitchfork. How does someone who dedicated their life to taking care of others treat someone like this that clearly needed their love and help? Apparently, Linda's husband remembers seeing Peggy unconscious on the floor when he came home one day, and Linda said that she had taken too many pills, when in reality, she had likely suffered from the long term abuse. And then apparently, Linda sent her family out to go get ice cream, and this is when investigators believe that she drove Peggy's body to Wisconsin and dragged her out to the cornfield and left her there. Linda's neighbors also testified saying that Peggy seemed scared of Linda. She wouldn't make eye contact. She was very quiet. She was very thin, and she clearly had injuries all over her body, her face. How did no one report this? And how did no one notice she went missing and call in to report her missing? This could have been solved when it happened. That kind of disregard for human life is unbelievable. Insane. Peggy lived with Linda for about 5 years up to her passing, and Linda never really explained the abuse that I could find or how Peggy got to the side of the road in Wisconsin. But there was clear evidence of long term abuse. Linda was sentenced to life in prison in 2022 for the unaliving of Peggy Lynn Johnson-Schroeder. Peggy's body apparently was exhumed and reburied with the rest of her family in Illinois. This case is so sickening because Linda should have been there for Peggy, a caretaker, like she had dedicated her career and life to be. And she just took complete advantage of this poor young woman who needed a home, who needed a family, who needed love, and treated her like this. I am so glad that this case got solved and that Peggy was able to be laid to rest with the rest of her family. It is just incomprehensible, though, that someone can treat another human being, an innocent soul, like that. It is awful, and rest in peace to Peggy.